the second of Kings, or according to the Greek Septuagint, the fourth of Kings. Chapter 1. And Moab began to revolt against Israel after the death of Ahab. Then Ahaziah fell down through the grating in his roof chamber that was in Samaria, and got sick. So he sent messengers, and said to them, Go, inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall revive from this sickness. As for the angel of Jehovah, he spoke to Elijah the Tishbite, Rise up, go up to meet the messengers of the king of Samaria, and say to them, Is it because there is no God at all in Israel that you are going to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? So therefore this is what Jehovah has said. As regards the couch upon which you have gone up, you will not come down off it, because you will positively die. With that Elijah went off. When the messengers came back to him, he immediately said to them, Why is it that you have come back? So they said to him, There was a man that came up to meet us, and he proceeded to say to us, Go, return to the king who sent you, and you must speak to him. This is what Jehovah has said. Is it because there is no God at all in Israel that you are sending to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore, as regards the couch upon which you have gone up, you will not come down off it, because you will positively die. At this he spoke to them. What was the appearance of the man that came up to meet you, and then spoke these words to you? So they said to him, A man possessing a hair garment, with a leather belt girded about his loins. Immediately he said, It was Elijah the Tishbite. And he proceeded to send to him a chief of 50 with his 50. When he went up to him, there he was sitting upon the top of the mountain. He now spoke to him, Man of the true God, the king himself has spoken. Do come down. But Elijah answered and spoke to the chief of the 50. Well, if I am a man of God, let fire come down from the heavens and eat up you and your 50. And fire came descending from the heavens, and went eating up him and his 50. So he sent again to him another chief of 50 with his 50. In turn he answered and spoke to him, Man of the true God, this is what the king has said. Do come down quickly. But Elijah answered and spoke to them, If I am a man of the true God, let fire come down from the heavens and eat up you and your 50. And fire of God came descending from the heavens, and went eating up him and his 50. And he went sending again a third chief of 50 and his 50. But the third chief of 50 went up and came and bent down upon his knees in front of Elijah, and began to implore favor of him, and speak to him. Man of the true God, please let my soul, and the soul of these 50 servants of yours, be precious in your eyes. Here fire came down from the heavens, and went eating up the 2 former chiefs of 50 and their 50s. But now let my soul be precious in your eyes. At that the angel of Jehovah spoke to Elijah, Go down with him. Do not be afraid because of him. So he rose and went down with him to the king. Then he spoke to him, This is what Jehovah has said. For the reason that you have sent messengers to inquire of Baal-zebub, the god of Ekron, is it because there is no God at all in Israel of whose word to inquire? Therefore, as regards the couch upon which you have gone up, you will not come down off it, because you will positively die. And he gradually died, according to the word of Jehovah that Elijah had spoken. And Jehoram began to reign in place of him, in the 2nd year of Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, because he had not come to have a son. As for the rest of Ahaziah's things that he did, Are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Chapter 2. And it came about that when Jehovah was to take Elijah in a windstorm up to the heavens, Elijah and Elisha proceeded to go from Gilgal. And Elijah began to say to Elisha, "Sit here, please, because Jehovah himself has sent me clear to Bethel." But Elisha said, "As Jehovah is living, and as your soul is living, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Then the sons of the prophets that were at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, "Do you really know that today Jehovah is taking your master from headship over you?" At this he said, "I too well know it. Be silent." Elijah now said to him, "Elisha, sit here, please, because Jehovah himself has sent me to Jericho." But he said, "As Jehovah is living and as your soul is living, I will not leave you." So they came on to Jericho. Then the sons of the prophets that were at Jericho approached Elisha and said to him, "Do you really know that today Jehovah is taking your master from headship over you?" At this he said, "I too well know it. Be silent." Elijah now said to him, "Sit here, please, because Jehovah himself has sent me to the Jordan." But he said, "As Jehovah is living, and as your soul is living, I will not leave you." So both of them went on. And there were 50 men of the sons of the prophets that went and kept standing in view at a distance. But as for both of them, they stood by the Jordan. Then Elijah took his official garment and wrapped it up and struck the waters. And gradually they were divided this way and that way, so that both of them went across on the dry ground. And it came about that as soon as they had gone across, Elijah himself said to Elisha, "Ask what I should do for you before I am taken from you." To this Elisha said, "Please, that 2 parts in your spirit may come to me." At that he said, "You have asked a difficult thing. If you see me when taken from you, it will happen to you that way. But if you do not, it will not happen." And it came about that as they were walking along, speaking as they walked, why, look, a fiery war chariot and fiery horses, and they proceeded to make a separation between them both. And Elijah went ascending in the windstorm to the heavens. All the while Elisha was seeing it, and he was crying out, "My father, my father, the war chariot of Israel and his horsemen!" And he did not see him any more. Consequently he took hold of his own garments and ripped them into 2 pieces. After that he picked up the official garment of Elijah that had fallen off him, and went back and stood by the shore of the Jordan. Then he took the official garment of Elijah that had fallen off him, and struck the waters and said, "Where is Jehovah the God of Elijah, even he?" When he struck the waters, then they were gradually divided this way and that way, so that Elisha went across. When the sons of the prophets that were at Jericho saw him some way off, they began to say, "The spirit of Elijah has settled down upon Elisha." Accordingly they came to meet him and bowed down to him to the earth. And they went on to say to him, "Here now, there are with your servants 50 men, valiant persons. Let them go, please, and look for your master. It may be that the Spirit of Jehovah has lifted him up, and then thrown him upon one of the mountains, or in one of the valleys." But he said, "You must not send them." And they kept urging him until he was embarrassed, so that he said, "Send." They now sent 50 men, and they kept looking for 3 days, but they did not find him. When they returned to him, he was dwelling in Jericho. Then he said to them, "Did I not say to you, 'Do not go'?" In time the men of the city said to Elisha, "Here now the situation of the city is good, just as my master is seeing, but the water is bad, and the land is causing miscarriages." At that he said, "Fetch me a small new bowl, and put salt in it." So they fetched it for him. Then he went on out to the source of the water, and threw salt in it, and said, "This is what Jehovah has said. I do make this water healthful. No more will death, or any causing of miscarriages, result from it." And the water continues healed down to this day, according to Elisha's word that he spoke. And he proceeded to go up from there to Bethel. As he was going up on the way, there were small boys that came out from the city and began to jeer him, and that kept saying to him, "Go up, you bald head! Go up, you bald head!" Finally he turned behind him and saw them, and called down evil upon them in the name of Jehovah. Then 2 she-bears came out from the woods and went tearing to pieces 42 children of their number. And he kept going from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he returned to Samaria. Chapter 3. As for Jehoram the son of Ahab, he became king over Israel in Samaria in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, and he continued to reign for 12 years. And he kept on doing what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, only not like his father or like his mother, but he removed the sacred pillar of Baal that his father had made. Only he stuck to the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin. He did not depart from them. As regards Mesha, the king of Moab, he became a sheep-raiser, and he paid to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and 100,000 unshorn male sheep. And it came about that as soon as Ahab died, the king of Moab began to revolt against the king of Israel. Consequently, King Jehoram went out on that day from Samaria and mustered all Israel. He went farther and now sent to Jehoshaphat the king of Judah, saying, "The king of Moab himself has revolted against me. Will you go with me to Moab in war?" To this he said, "I shall go. I am the same as you are. My people are the same as your people. My horses are the same as your horses." And he went on to say, "By which particular way shall we go up?" So he said, "By the way of the wilderness of Edom." And the king of Israel, and the king of Judah, and the king of Edom proceeded to go, and they kept going their way around for 7 days, and there proved to be no water for the camp, and for the domestic animals that were following their steps. At length the king of Israel said, "How unfortunate that Jehovah has called these 3 kings to give them into the hand of Moab." At that Jehoshaphat said, "Is there not here a prophet of Jehovah? Then let us inquire of Jehovah through him." So one of the servants of the king of Israel answered and said, "There is here Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who poured out water upon the hands of Elijah." Then Jehoshaphat said, "The word of Jehovah exists with him." Accordingly the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. And Elisha proceeded to say to the king of Israel, "What do I have to do with you? Go to the prophets of your father and to the prophets of your mother." But the king of Israel said to him, "No, for Jehovah has called these 3 kings to give them into the hand of Moab." To this Elisha said, "As Jehovah of armies before whom I do stand is living, if it were not that it is the face of Jehoshaphat the king of Judah for which I am having consideration, I would not look at you or see you. And now, you men, fetch me a string instrument player." And it occurred that as soon as the string instrument player played, the hand of Jehovah came to be upon him, And he went on to say, "This is what Jehovah has said. Let there be a making of this torrent valley full of ditches. For this is what Jehovah has said. You men will not see a wind, and you will not see a downpour, yet that torrent valley will be filled with water, and you men will certainly drink from it, you and your livestock and your domestic animals. And this will indeed be a trivial thing in the eyes of Jehovah, and he will certainly give Moab into your hand. And you must strike down every fortified city, and every choice city, and every good tree you should fell, and all the springs of water you should stop up, and every good tract of land you should mar with stones." And it came about in the morning, at the time of the going up of the grain offering, that, look, water was coming from the direction of Edom, and the land came to be filled with the water. As regards all the Moabites, they heard that the kings had come up to fight against them. Consequently, they called together men from as many as were girding on a belt and upward, and they began standing at the boundary. When they got up early in the morning, the sun itself flashed upon the water, so that the Moabites from the opposite side saw the water red, like blood. And they began to say, "This is blood. The kings have unquestionably been put to the sword, and they went striking one another down. So now to the spoil, O Moab!" When they came into the camp of Israel, the Israelites immediately rose up and began striking the Moabites down, so that they took to flight from before them. Hence they came into Moab, striking the Moabites down as they came. And the cities they went throwing down. And as for every good tract of land, they would pitch each one his stone and actually fill it. And every spring of water they would stop up. And every good tree they would fell, until they left only the stones of Kir-hareseth remaining in it. And the slingers began going around it and striking it down. When the king of Moab saw that the battle had proved too strong for him, he at once took with him 700 men drawing sword to break through to the king of Edom, but they were not able to. Finally he took his firstborn son, who was going to reign in place of him, and offered him up as a burnt sacrifice upon the wall. And there came to be great indignation against Israel, so that they pulled away from against him and returned to their land. Chapter 4. Now there was a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets that cried out to Elisha, saying, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you yourself well know that your own servant had continually feared Jehovah, and the creditor himself has come to take both my children for his slaves." At this Elisha said to her, "What shall I do for you? Tell me, what do you have in the house?" To this she said, "Your maidservant has nothing at all in the house but a spouted jar of oil." Then he said, "Go, ask for vessels for yourself from outside, from all your neighbors, empty vessels. Do not hold yourself to a few. And you must go and close the door behind yourself and your sons, and you must pour out into all these vessels, and the full ones you should set aside." Upon that she went away from him. When she closed the door behind herself and her sons, they were bringing the vessels near to her, and she was doing the pouring out. And it came about that as soon as the vessels were full, she went on to say to her son, "Do bring still another vessel near to me." But he said to her, "There is no other vessel." At that the oil stopped. So she came in and told the man of the true God, and he now said, "Go, sell the oil and pay off your debts, and you and your sons should live from what is left." And it came about one day that Elisha went passing along to Shunem, where there was a prominent woman, and she began to constrain him to eat bread. And it came about that as often as he would pass by, he would turn aside there to eat bread. At length she said to her husband, "Here now I well know that it is a holy man of God that is passing by us constantly. Please, Let us make a little roof chamber on the wall, and put there for him a couch, and a table, and a chair, and a lampstand. And it must occur that whenever he comes in to us, he can turn aside there. And it came about one day that, as usual, he came in there and turned aside to the roof chamber, and lay down there. So he said to Gehazi his attendant, Call this Shunammite woman. At that he called her, that she might stand before him. Then he said to him, Please say to her, Here you have restricted yourself for us with all this restriction. What is there to be done for you? Is there anything to speak to the king or to the chief of the army for you? To this she said, In among my own people I am dwelling. And he went on to say, What then is there to be done for her? Gehazi now said, For a fact a son she does not have, and her husband is old. Immediately he said, Call her. So he called her, and she kept standing at the entrance. Then he said, At this appointed time next year, you will be embracing a son. But she said, No, my master, O man of the true God, do not tell lies in connection with your maidservant. However, the woman became pregnant, and gave birth to a son at this appointed time the next year, just as Elisha had spoken to her. And the child kept on growing up, and it came about one day that he went out as usual to his father with the reapers. And he kept saying to his father, My head, oh, my head. At last he said to the attendant, Carry him to his mother. Accordingly he carried him and brought him to his mother, and he kept sitting upon her knees until noon, and gradually he died. Then she went up and laid him upon the couch of the man of the true God, and closed the door upon him, and went out. She now called her husband and said, Do send me, please, one of the attendants and one of the she-asses, and let me run as far as the man of the true God, and return. But he said, Why are you going to him today? It is not a new moon, nor a Sabbath. However, she said, It is all right. So she saddled up the she-ass and said to her attendant, Drive and go ahead. Do not hold back for my sake from riding, unless I shall have said so to you. And she proceeded to go, and come to the man of the true God at Mount Carmel. And it came about that as soon as the man of the true God saw her out ahead, he immediately said to Gehazi his attendant, Look, the Shunammite woman over there. Now run, please, to meet her, and say to her, Is it all right with you? Is it all right with your husband? Is it all right with the child? To this she said, It is all right. When she came to the man of the true God at the mountain, she at once took hold of him by his feet. At this Gehazi came near to push her away, but the man of the true God said, Let her alone, for her soul is bitter within her, and Jehovah himself has hidden it from me, and not told me. She now said, Did I ask for a son through my Lord? Did I not say, You must not lead me to a false hope? Immediately he said to Gehazi, Gird up your loins, and take my staff in your hand, and go. In case you encounter anyone, you must not greet him, and in case anyone should greet you, you must not answer him. And you must place my staff upon the face of the boy. At this the mother of the boy said, As Jehovah is living, and as your soul is living, I will not leave you. Therefore he got up and went with her. And Gehazi himself passed along before them, and then put the staff upon the boy's face. But there was no voice, nor paying of attention. So he went back to meet him, and told him, saying, The boy did not wake up. At last Elisha came into the house, and there the boy was dead, being laid upon his couch. Then he came in and closed the door behind them both, and began to pray to Jehovah. Finally he went up, and lay down upon the child, and put his own mouth upon his mouth, and his own eyes upon his eyes, and his own palms upon his palms, and kept bent over him, and gradually the child's flesh grew warm. Then he began walking again in the house, once this way and once that way, after which he went up and bent over him. And the boy began to sneeze, as many as 7 times, after which the boy opened his eyes. He now called Gehazi and said, "Call this Shunammite woman." So he called her, and she came in to him. Then he said, "Lift up your son." And she proceeded to come in and fall at his feet, and bow down to him to the earth, after which she lifted up her son and went out. And Elisha himself returned to Gilgal, and there was famine in the land. As the sons of the prophets were sitting before him, he in time said to his attendant, "Put the large cooking pot on, and boil stew for the sons of the prophets." Accordingly a certain one went out to the field to pick mallows, and he got to find a wild vine, and went picking wild gourds from it, his garment full, and then came and sliced them into the stew pot, for they were not acquainted with them. Later they poured it out for the men to eat. And it came about that as soon as they ate from the stew, they themselves cried out and began saying, "There is death in the pot, O man of the true God." And they were not able to eat. So he said, "Fetch then flour." After he threw it into the pot, he went on to say, "Pour out for the people, that they may eat." And nothing injurious proved to be in the pot. And there was a man that came from Baal-Shalishah, and he came bringing to the man of the true God bread of the first ripe fruits, 20 barley loaves, and new grain in his bread bag. Then he said, "Give it to the people, that they may eat." However, his waiter said, "How shall I put this before 100 men?" To this he said, "Give it to the people, that they may eat, for this is what Jehovah has said, there will be an eating and a having of leftovers." At that he put it before them, and they began to eat, and they had leftovers according to the word of Jehovah. Chapter 5. Now a certain Naaman, the chief of the army of the king of Syria, had become a great man before his Lord, and held in esteem, because it was by him that Jehovah had given salvation to Syria, and the man himself had proved to be a valiant, mighty man, though a leper. And the Syrians, for their part, had gone out as marauder bands, and they got to take captive from the land of Israel a little girl, and she came to be before Naaman's wife. In time she said to her mistress, "If only my Lord were before the prophet that is in Samaria, in that case he would recover him from his leprosy." Subsequently someone came and reported to his Lord, saying, "It was like this and that the girl spoke who is from the land of Israel." Then the king of Syria said, "Get going, come, and let me send a letter to the king of Israel." So he proceeded to go, and take in his hand 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of garments. And he came bringing the letter to the king of Israel, saying, "And now at the same time that this letter comes to you, here I do send to you Naaman my servant, that you may recover him from his leprosy." And it came about that as soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he immediately ripped his garments apart and said, "Am I God, to put to death and to preserve alive? For this person is sending to me to recover a man from his leprosy. For just take note, please, you men, and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." And it came about that as soon as Elisha, the man of the true God, heard that the king of Israel had ripped his garments apart, he at once sent to the king, saying, "Why did you rip your garments apart? Let him come, please, to me, that he may know that there exists a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and his war chariots, and stood at the entrance of the house of Elisha. However, Elisha sent a messenger to him, saying, "Going there, you must bathe 7 times in the Jordan, that your flesh may come back to you, and be clean." At this Naaman grew indignant, and began to go away and say, "Here I had said to myself, to me he will come out all the way, and will certainly stand and call upon the name of Jehovah his God, and move his hand to and fro over the place, and actually give the leper recovery. Are not the Abana and the Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Can I not bathe in them and certainly be clean?" With that he turned and went away in a rage. His servants now approached and spoke to him and said, "My father, had it been a great thing that the prophet himself had spoken to you, would you not do it? How much more, then, since he said to you, 'Bathe and be clean'?" At that he went down and began to plunge into the Jordan 7 times, according to the word of the man of the true God. After which his flesh came back like the flesh of a little boy, and he became clean. Then he went back to the man of the true God, he with all his camp, and came and stood before him, and said, "Here now I certainly know that there is no God anywhere in the earth but in Israel. And now accept, please, a blessing gift from your servant." However, he said, "As Jehovah before whom I do stand is living, I will not accept it." And he began to urge him to accept it, but he kept refusing. Finally Naaman said, "If not, please let there be given to your servant some ground, the load of a pair of mules, because your servant will no more render up a burnt offering or a sacrifice to any other gods but to Jehovah. In this thing may Jehovah forgive your servant. When my Lord comes into the house of Rimmon to bow down there, and he is supporting himself upon my hand, and I have to bow down at the house of Rimmon. When I bow down at the house of Rimmon, may Jehovah please forgive your servant in this respect." At this he said to him, "Go in peace." Accordingly he went away from him for a good stretch of the land. Then Gehazi, the attendant of Elisha, the man of the true God, said, "Here my master has spared Naaman the Syrian by not accepting from his hand what he brought. As Jehovah is living, I will run after him and take something from him." And Gehazi went chasing after Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running after him, he at once got down from his chariot to meet him, and then said, "Is all well?" To this he said, "All is well. My master himself has sent me, saying, 'Look, just now there have come to me 2 young men from the mountainous region of Ephraim, from the sons of the prophets. Do give them, please, a talent of silver and 2 changes of garments.'" At that Naaman said, "Go on, take 2 talents. And he kept urging him, and finally bound up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags, with 2 changes of garments, and gave them to 2 of his attendants, that they might carry them before him. When he came to Ophel, he immediately took them from their hand and deposited them in the house, and sent the men away. So off they went. And he himself came in and then stood by his master. Elisha now said to him, "Where did you come from, Gehazi?" But he said, "Your servant did not go anywhere at all." At that he said to him, "Did not my heart itself go along just as the man turned to get down off his chariot to meet you? Is it a time to accept silver, or to accept garments, or olive groves, or vineyards, or sheep, or cattle, or men servants, or maidservants? So the leprosy of Naaman will stick to you and your offspring to time indefinite." Immediately he went out from before him, a leper, white as snow. Chapter 6. And the sons of the prophets began to say to Elisha, "Look now, the place where we are dwelling before you is too cramped for us. Let us go, please, as far as the Jordan, and take from there each one a beam, and make for ourselves there a place in which to dwell." So he said, "Go." And a certain one went on to say, "Come on, please, and go with your servants." At that he said, "I myself shall go." Accordingly he went with them, and they finally came to the Jordan and began to cut down the trees. And it came about that a certain one was felling his beam, and the axe head itself fell into the water. And he began to cry out and say, "Alas, my master, for it was borrowed." Then the man of the true God said, "Where did it fall?" So he showed him the place. Immediately he cut off a piece of wood, and threw it there, and made the axe head float. He now said, "Lift it up for yourself." At once he thrust his hand out, and took it. And the king of Syria, for his part, became involved in war against Israel. Accordingly he took counsel with his servants, saying, "At such and such a place you will encamp with me." Then the man of the true God sent to the king of Israel, saying, "Guard yourself against passing by this place, because there is where the Syrians are coming down." So the king of Israel sent to the place that the man of the true God had said to him. And he warned him, and he kept away from there not once or twice. Consequently, the heart of the king of Syria became enraged over this matter, so that he called his servants and said to them, "Will you not tell me who from those who belong to us is for the king of Israel?" Then one of his servants said, "None, my lord the king, but it is Elisha the prophet who is in Israel that tells the king of Israel the things that you speak in your inner bedroom." So he said, "You men go and see where he is, that I may send and take him." Later the report was made to him, saying, "There he is in Dothan." Immediately he sent horses and war chariots and a heavy military force there, and they proceeded to come by night and close in upon the city. When the minister of the man of the true God rose early to get up and went out, why, there a military force was surrounding the city with horses and war chariots. At once his attendant said to him, "Alas, my master, what shall we do?" But he said, "Do not be afraid, for there are more who are with us than those who are with them." And Elisha began to pray and say, "O Jehovah, open his eyes, please, that he may see." Immediately Jehovah opened the attendant's eyes, so that he saw, and look, the mountainous region was full of horses and war chariots of fire, all around Elisha. When they began to come down to him, Elisha went on to pray to Jehovah and say, "Please, strike this nation with blindness." So he struck them with blindness according to the word of Elisha. Elisha now said to them, "This is not the way, and this is not the city. Follow me, and let me conduct you to the man you look for." However, he conducted them to Samaria. And it came about that as soon as they arrived at Samaria, Elisha then said, "O Jehovah, open the eyes of these, that they may see." Immediately Jehovah opened their eyes, and they got to see, and here they were in the middle of Samaria. The king of Israel now said to Elisha as soon as he saw them, "Shall I strike them down? Shall I strike them down, my father?" But he said, "You must not strike them down. Are those whom you have taken captive with your sword and with your bow the ones that you are striking down? Set bread and water before them, that they may eat and drink and go to their lord." Accordingly he spread a great feast for them, and they began to eat and drink, after which he sent them away, and they went to their lord. And not once did the marauding bands of the Syrians come again into the land of Israel. And it came about afterward that Ben-Hadad the king of Syria proceeded to collect all his camp together, and to go up and besiege Samaria. In time a great famine arose in Samaria, and look, they were besieging it until an ass's head got to be worth 80 silver pieces, and the fourth of a cab measure of dove's dung was worth 5 silver pieces. And it came about, as the king of Israel was passing along upon the wall, that a certain woman cried out to him, saying, "Do save, O my lord the king." To this he said, "If Jehovah does not save you, from what source shall I save you, either from the threshing floor or from the wine or oil press?" And the king went on to say to her, "What is the matter with you?" So she said, "This very woman said to me, 'Give your son that we may eat him today, and my own son we shall eat tomorrow.' Accordingly we boiled my son and ate him. Then I said to her on the next day, Give your son that we may eat him. But she hid her son. And it came about that as soon as the king heard the woman's words, he immediately ripped his garments apart. And as he was passing along upon the wall, the people got to see, and look, sackcloth was underneath upon his flesh. And he went on to say, So may God do to me, and so may he add to it, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat continues standing upon him today. And Elisha was sitting in his own house, and the older men were sitting with him, when he sent a man from before him. Before the messenger could come in to him, he himself said to the older men, Have you seen how this son of a murderer has sent to take off my head? See to it, as soon as the messenger comes, close the door, and you must press him back with the door. Is there not the sound of the feet of his Lord behind him? While he was yet speaking with them, here was the messenger coming down to him, and the king proceeded to say, Here this is the calamity from Jehovah. Why should I wait any longer for Jehovah? Chapter 7. Elisha now said, Listen, you men, to the word of Jehovah. This is what Jehovah has said. Tomorrow about this time a seah measure of fine flour will be worth a shekel, and 2 seah measures of barley worth a shekel in the gateway of Samaria. At that the adjutant upon whose hand the king was supporting himself answered the man of the true God and said, If Jehovah were making floodgates in the heavens, could this thing take place? To this he said, Here you are seeing it with your own eyes, but from it you will not eat. And there were 4 men, lepers, that happened to be at the entrance of the gate, and they began to say the one to the other, Why are we sitting here until we have died? If we had said, Let us enter the city, when the famine is in the city, we would also have to die there. And if we do sit here, we shall also have to die. So now come and let us invade the camp of the Syrians. If they preserve us alive, we shall live. But if they put us to death, then we shall have to die. Accordingly they rose up in the evening darkness to enter the camp of the Syrians. And they got to come as far as the outskirts of the camp of the Syrians, and look, nobody was there. And Jehovah himself had caused the camp of the Syrians to hear the sound of war chariots, the sound of horses, the sound of a great military force, so that they said to one another, Look, the king of Israel has hired against us the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Egypt to come against us. Immediately they got up and went fleeing in the evening darkness, and leaving their tents and their horses and their asses, the camp just as it was, and they kept fleeing for their soul. When these lepers came as far as the outskirts of the camp, they then entered into one tent, and began to eat and drink, and carry from there silver and gold and garments, and go off and stick them away. After that they returned and entered into another tent, and carried things from there, and went off and stuck them away. Finally they began to say the one to the other, It is not right what we are doing. This day is a day of good news. If we are hesitating, and we actually wait until the morning light, guilt must also catch up with us. So now come and let us enter and make report at the king's house. So they came and called to the gatekeepers of the city, and reported to them, saying, We came into the camp of the Syrians, and look, there was nobody there, nor sound of a man, but only the horses tied and the asses tied, and the tents just as they were. At once the gatekeepers called out, and they reported to the king's house inside. Immediately the king rose up by night and said to his servants, Let me tell you, please, what the Syrians have done to us. They well know that we are hungry, and so they went out from the camp to hide themselves in the field, saying, They will come out from the city, and we shall catch them alive, and into the city we shall enter. Then one of his servants answered and said, Let them take, please, 5 of the remaining horses that have remained in the city. Look, they are the same as all the crowd of Israel that have remained in it. Look, they are the same as all the crowd of Israel that have perished. And let us send out and see. Accordingly, they took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent them out after the camp of the Syrians, saying, Go and see. At that they went following them as far as the Jordan, and look, all the way was full of garments and utensils that the Syrians had thrown away as they were hurrying away. Then the messengers returned and reported to the king. And the people proceeded to go out and plunder the camp of the Syrians. And so a seah measure of fine flour came to be worth a shekel, and 2 seah measures of barley worth a shekel, according to the word of Jehovah. And the king himself had appointed the adjutant upon whose hand he was supporting himself to have charge of the gateway, and the people kept trampling him in the gateway, so that he died, just as the man of the true God had spoken when he spoke at the time that the king came down to him. Thus it came about, just as the man of the true God had spoken to the king, saying, 2 seah measures of barley worth a shekel, and a seah measure of fine flour worth a shekel it will come to be tomorrow at this time in the gateway of Samaria. But the adjutant answered the man of the true God and said, Even if Jehovah were making floodgates in the heavens, could it take place according to this word? To this he said, Here you are seeing it with your own eyes, but from it you will not eat. Thus it happened to him like that, when the people kept trampling him in the gateway, so that he died. Chapter 8. And Elisha himself had spoken to the woman whose son he had revived, saying, Rise up and go, you with your household, and reside as an alien wherever you can reside as an alien. For Jehovah has called for a famine, and besides, it must come upon the land for 7 years. So the woman got up and did according to the word of the man of the true God, and went, she with her household, and took up residence as an alien in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. And it came about at the end of 7 years that the woman proceeded to return from the land of the Philistines, and go forth to cry out to the king for her house and for her field. Now the king was speaking to Gehazi, the attendant of the man of the true God, saying, Do relate to me, please, all the great things that Elisha has done. And it came about that as he was relating to the king how he had revived the dead one, why, here the woman whose son he had revived was crying out to the king for her house and for her field. At once Gehazi said, My lord the king, this is the woman, and this is her son whom Elisha revived. At that the king asked the woman, and she went on to relate to him the story. Then the king gave her a court official, saying, Return all that belongs to her, and all the products of the field from the day of her leaving the land until now. And Elisha proceeded to come to Damascus, and Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, was sick. Accordingly the report was made to him, saying, The man of the true God has come as far as here. At that the king said to Hazael, Take a gift in your hand, and go and meet the man of the true God. And you must inquire of Jehovah through him, saying, Shall I revive from this sickness? So Hazael went to meet him, and took a gift in his hand, even every sort of good thing of Damascus, the load of 40 camels, and came and stood before him, and said, Your son Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, has sent me to you, saying, Shall I revive from this sickness? Then Elisha said to him, Go, say to him, You will positively revive, and Jehovah has shown me that he will positively die. And he kept a fixed look, and kept it set to the point of embarrassment. Then the man of the true God gave way to weeping. At this Hazael said, Why is my lord weeping? To this he said, because I well know what injury you will do to the sons of Israel. Their fortified places you will consign to the fire, and their choice men you will kill with the sword, and their children you will dash to pieces, and their pregnant women you will rip up." Upon that Hazael said, "What is your servant, who is a mere dog, that he could do this great thing?" But Elisha said, "Jehovah has shown me you as king over Syria." After that he went from Elisha and came to his own lord, who then said to him, "What did Elisha say to you?" To this he said, "He said to me, 'You will positively revive.'" And it came about on the next day that he proceeded to take a coverlet, and dip it in water, and spread it out over his face, so that he died. And Hazael began to reign in place of him. And in the 5th year of Jehoram the son of Ahab the king of Israel, while Jehoshaphat was king of Judah, Jehoram the son of Jehoshaphat the king of Judah became king. 32 years old he happened to be when he became king, and for 8 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And he went walking in the way of the kings of Israel, just as those of the house of Ahab had done. For it was Ahab's daughter that became his wife, and he kept doing what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. And Jehovah did not want to bring Judah to ruin for the sake of David his servant, just as he had promised him to give a lamp to him and to his sons always. In his days Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah, and then made a king reign over them. Consequently Jehoram passed over to Zair, also all the chariots with him. And it came about that he himself rose up by night, and got to strike down the Edomites that were surrounding him, and the chiefs of the chariots, and the people went fleeing to their tents. But Edom kept up its revolt from under the hand of Judah down to this day. It was then that Libnah began to revolt at that time. And the rest of the affairs of Jehoram, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? Finally Jehoram lay down with his forefathers, and was buried with his forefathers in the city of David. And Ahaziah his son began to reign in place of him. In the 12th year of Jehoram the son of Ahab the king of Israel, Ahaziah the son of Jehoram the king of Judah became king. 22 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign, and for 1 year he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, the king of Israel. And he went walking in the way of the house of Ahab, and kept doing what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, like the house of Ahab, for he was a relative of the house of Ahab by marriage. Accordingly he went with Jehoram the son of Ahab to the war against Hazael, the king of Syria, at Ramoth-Gilead. But the Syrians struck down Jehoram. So Jehoram the king returned to get healed at Jezreel from the wounds that the Syrians got to inflict upon him at Ramah, when he fought Hazael the king of Syria. As for Ahaziah the son of Jehoram the king of Judah, he went down to see Jehoram the son of Ahab in Jezreel, for he was sick. Chapter 9. And Elisha the prophet, for his part, called one of the sons of the prophets, and then said to him, "Gird up your loins, and take this flask of oil in your hand, and go to Ramoth-Gilead. When you have come in there, see Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, there. And you must come in, and make him get up from the midst of his brothers, and bring him into the innermost chamber. And you must take the flask of oil, and pour it out upon his head, and say, 'This is what Jehovah has said. I do anoint you as king over Israel.' And you must open the door and flee, and not wait." And the attendant, the prophet's attendant, got on his way to Ramoth-Gilead. When he came in, why, there the chiefs of the military force were seated. He now said, "There is a word I have for you, O chief." At this Jehu said, "For which one of all of us?" Then he said, "For you, O chief." So he got up and came into the house, and he proceeded to pour the oil out upon his head, and say to him, This is what Jehovah, the God of Israel, has said. I do anoint you as king over Jehovah's people, that is, over Israel. And you must strike down the house of Ahab your lord, and I must avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of Jehovah at the hand of Jezebel. And the whole house of Ahab must perish, and I must cut off from Ahab anyone urinating against a wall, and any helpless and worthless one in Israel. And I must constitute the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. And Jezebel the dogs will eat up in the tract of land at Jezreel, and there will be no one burying her. With that he opened the door and went fleeing. As for Jehu, he went out to the servants of his lord, and they began to say to him, Is everything all right? Why did this crazy man come into you? But he said to them, You yourselves well know the man and his sort of talk. But they said, It is false. Tell us, please. Then he said, It was like this and like that he talked to me, saying, This is what Jehovah has said. I do anoint you as king over Israel. At this they hurriedly took each one his garment, and put it under him upon the bare steps. And they began to blow the horn and say, Jehu has become king. And Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat the son of Nimshi proceeded to conspire against Jehoram. And Jehoram himself had happened to be keeping guard at Ramoth-Gilead, he with all Israel, because of Hazael the king of Syria. Later Jehoram the king returned to get healed at Jezreel from the wounds that the Syrians got to inflict upon him when he fought Hazael the king of Syria. Jehu now said, If your soul agrees, do not let anyone go out and escape from the city to go and make report in Jezreel. And Jehu began to ride and go to Jezreel, for Jehoram was lying there, and Ahaziah the king of Judah himself had gone down to see Jehoram. And the watchman was standing upon the tower in Jezreel, and he got to see the heaving mass of Jehu's men as he was coming. And he at once said, There is a heaving mass of men that I am seeing. At that Jehoram said, Take a cavalryman, and send him to meet them, and let him say, Is there peace? Accordingly a rider on a horse went to meet him and said, This is what the king has said. Is there peace? But Jehu said, What do you have to do with peace? Get around to my rear. And the watchman went on to report, saying, The messenger came as far as to them, but he has not returned. So he sent out a second rider on a horse, who, when he came to them, proceeded to say, This is what the king has said. Is there peace? But Jehu said, What do you have to do with peace? Get around to my rear. And the watchman went on to report, saying, He came as far as to them, but he has not returned. And the driving is like the driving of Jehu, the grandson of Nimshi, for it is with madness that he drives. At that Jehoram said, Hitch up. So his war chariot was hitched up, and Jehoram the king of Israel and Ahaziah the king of Judah went out, each in his own war chariot. As they continued on out to meet Jehu, they got to find him in the tract of land of Naboth, the Jezreelite. And it came about that as soon as Jehoram saw Jehu, he immediately said, Is there peace, Jehu? But he said, What peace could there be as long as there are the fornications of Jezebel your mother and her many sorceries? At once Jehoram made a turn with his hands that he might flee, and said to Ahaziah, There is trickery, Ahaziah. And Jehu himself filled his hand with a bow, and proceeded to shoot Jehoram between the arms, so that the arrow came out at his heart, and he collapsed in his war chariot. He now said to Bidkar, his adjutant, Lift him up, throw him into the tract of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite, for remember, I and you were riding teams behind Ahab his father, and Jehovah himself lifted up this pronouncement against him. Certainly the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons I saw yesterday, is the utterance of Jehovah. And I shall certainly repay you in this tract of land, is the utterance of Jehovah. So now lift him up, throw him into the tract of land according to the word of Jehovah. And Ahaziah the king of Judah himself saw it, and took to flight by the way of the garden house. Later Jehu went in pursuit of him and said, Him also, strike him down. So they struck him down while in the chariot on the way up to Gur, which is by Ibleam, and he continued his flight to Megiddo, and got to die there. Then his servants carried him in a chariot to Jerusalem, and so they buried him in his grave with his forefathers in the city of David. And it was in the 11th year of Jehoram the son of Ahab that Ahaziah had become king over Judah. At length Jehu came to Jezreel, and Jezebel herself heard of it. And she proceeded to paint her eyes with black paint, and do her head up beautifully, and to look down through the window. And Jehu himself came in by the gate. She now said, Did it go all right with Zimri, the killer of his lord? At that he raised his face toward the window and said, Who is with me? Who? Immediately 2 or 3 court officials looked down at him. So he said, Let her drop. Then they let her drop, and some of her blood went spattering upon the wall and upon the horses, and he now trampled upon her. After that he came on in and ate and drank, and then said, You men, please, take care of this accursed one and bury her, for she is the daughter of a king. When they went to bury her, they did not find anything of her but the skull, and the feet and the palms of the hands. When they returned and told him, he went on to say, It is the word of Jehovah that he spoke by means of his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the tract of land of Jezreel the dogs will eat the flesh of Jezebel. And the dead body of Jezebel will certainly become as manure upon the face of the field in the tract of land of Jezreel, that they may not say, This is Jezebel. Chapter 10. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Therefore Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria to the princes of Jezreel, the older men and the caretakers of Ahab, saying, Now then, at the very time that this letter comes to you, there are with you the sons of your Lord, and there are with you the war chariots and the horses and a fortified city and the armor. And you must see which is the best and most upright of the sons of your Lord, and put him upon the throne of his father. Then fight for the house of your Lord. And they became very greatly afraid and began to say, Look, 2 kings themselves did not stand before him, and how shall we ourselves stand? Consequently the one who was over the house, and the one who was over the city, and the older men, and the caretakers, sent to Jehu, saying, We are your servants, and everything that you say to us we shall do. We shall not make any one king. What is good in your own eyes, do. At that he wrote them a second letter, saying, If you belong to me, and it is my voice that you are obeying, take the heads of the men that are sons of your Lord, and come to me tomorrow at this time at Jezreel. Now the sons of the king, 70 men, were with the distinguished men of the city that were bringing them up. And it came about that as soon as the letter came to them, they went taking the sons of the king and slaughtering them, 70 men, after which they put their heads in baskets and sent them to him at Jezreel. Then the messenger came in and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the sons of the king. So he said, Put them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning. And it came about in the morning that he proceeded to go out. Then he stood still and said to all the people, You are righteous. Here I myself conspired against my Lord, and I got to kill him. But who struck down all these? Know then that nothing of Jehovah's word will fall unfulfilled to the earth, that Jehovah has spoken against the house of Ahab. And Jehovah himself has done what he spoke by means of his servant Elijah. Moreover, Jehu went on to strike down all who were left over of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, and all his distinguished men, and his acquaintances, and his priests, until he had let no survivor of his remain. And he proceeded to rise and come in, then get on his way to Samaria. The binding house of the shepherds was on the way. And Jehu himself encountered the brothers of Ahaziah the king of Judah. When he said to them, "Who are you?" Then they said, "We are the brothers of Ahaziah, and we are on our way down to ask if all is well with the sons of the king and the sons of the lady." Immediately he said, "Seize them alive, you men." So they seized them alive and slaughtered them at the cistern of the binding house, 42 men, and he did not let a single one of them remain. As he was going along from there, he got to encounter Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him. When he blessed him, he accordingly said to him, "Is your heart upright with me, just as my own heart is with your heart?" To this Jehonadab said, "It is." "If it is, do give me your hand." So he gave him his hand. At that he made him get up into the chariot with him. Then he said, "Do go along with me, and look upon my toleration of no rivalry toward Jehovah." And they kept him riding with him in his war chariot. Finally he came to Samaria. Now he went striking down all who were left over of Ahab's in Samaria, until he had annihilated them, according to Jehovah's word that he had spoken to Elijah. Further, Jehu collected all the people together and said to them, "Ahab, on the one hand, worship Baal a little. Jehu, on the other hand, will worship him a great deal. So now call all the prophets of Baal, all his worshippers and all his priests to me. Do not let a single one be missing, because I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Anyone that is missing will not keep living." As for Jehu, he acted slyly for the purpose of destroying the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu went on to say, "Sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal." Accordingly they proclaimed it. After that Jehu sent through all Israel, so that all the worshippers of Baal came in, and not a single one was left over that did not come in. And they kept coming into the house of Baal, and the house of Baal came to be full from end to end. He now said to the one who was over the wardrobe, "Bring out garments for all the worshippers of Baal." So he brought the attire out for them. Then Jehu entered with Jehonadab the son of Rechab into the house of Baal. He now said to the worshippers of Baal, "Search carefully, and see that there may be here with you none of the worshippers of Jehovah, but only the worshippers of Baal." Finally they came in to render up sacrifices and burnt offerings, and Jehu himself stationed 80 men outside at his disposal, and went on to say, "As for the man that escapes from the men whom I am bringing into your hands, the one soul will go for the other soul." And it came about that as soon as he finished rendering up the burnt offering, Jehu immediately said to the runners and the adjutants, "Come in, strike them down, do not let a single one go out." And the runners and the adjutants began to strike them down with the edge of the sword, and to throw them out, and they kept going as far as the city of the house of Baal. Then they brought out the sacred pillars of the house of Baal, and burned each one. Further, they pulled down the sacred pillar of Baal, and pulled down the house of Baal, and they kept it set aside for privies down to this day. Thus Jehu annihilated Baal out of Israel. It was only the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin, that Jehu did not turn aside from following them, that is, the golden calves, of which one was in Bethel and one in Dan. Consequently, Jehovah said to Jehu, "For the reason that you have acted well in doing what is right in my eyes, and according to all that was in my heart you have done to the house of Ahab, sons themselves to the 4th generation will sit for you upon the throne of Israel." And Jehu himself did not take care to walk in the law of Jehovah the God of Israel with all his heart. He did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam, with which he caused Israel to sin. In those days Jehovah started to cut off Israel piece by piece, and Hazael kept striking them in all the territory of Israel, from the Jordan toward the rising of the sun, all the land of Gilead, the Gadites, and the Reubenites, and the Manassites, from Aroer, which is by the torn valley of Arnon, even Gilead, and Bashan. And the rest of the affairs of Jehu and all that he did, and all his mightiness, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Finally Jehu lay down with his forefathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Jehoahaz his son began to reign in place of him. And the days that Jehu had reigned over Israel were 28 years in Samaria. Chapter 11. Now as regards Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, she saw that her son had died. So she rose up and destroyed all the offspring of the kingdom. However, Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, the sister of Ahaziah, took Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him from among the sons of the king that were to be put to death, even him and his nursing woman, into the inner room for the couches. And they kept him concealed from the face of Athaliah, and he was not put to death. And he continued with her at the house of Jehovah in hiding for 6 years, while Athaliah was reigning over the land. And in the 7th year Jehoiada sent and then took the chiefs of hundreds, of the Carian bodyguard, and of the runners, and brought them to himself at the house of Jehovah, and concluded a covenant with them, and made them swear at the house of Jehovah, after which he showed them the son of the king. And he went on to command them, saying, This is the thing that you will do. 1/3 of you are coming in on the Sabbath, and keeping strict watch over the king's house. And 1/3 will be at the gate of the foundation, and 1/3 will be at the gate behind the runners. And you must keep strict watch over the house by turns. And there are 2 divisions among you that are all going out on the Sabbath, and they must keep strict watch over the house of Jehovah in behalf of the king. And you must encircle the king all around, each one with his weapons in his hand, and anyone entering within the rows will be put to death. And continue with the king when he goes out and when he comes in. And the chiefs of hundreds proceeded to do according to all that Jehoiada the priest had commanded. So they took each one his men that were coming in on the Sabbath, together with those that were going out on the Sabbath, and then came in to Jehoiada the priest. The priest now gave the chiefs of hundreds the spears and the circular shields that had belonged to King David, which were in the house of Jehovah. And the runners kept standing each one with his weapons in his hand, from the right side of the house clear to the left side of the house, by the altar and by the house, all around near the king. Then he brought the son of the king out, and put upon him the diadem and the testimony, and so they made him king and anointed him. And they began to clap their hands and say, Let the king live. When Athaliah heard the sound of the people running, she at once came to the people at the house of Jehovah. Then she saw, and there the king was standing by the pillar according to the custom, and the chiefs and the trumpets by the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing the trumpets. Immediately Athaliah ripped her garments apart and began crying, Conspiracy! Conspiracy! But Jehoiada the priest commanded the chiefs of hundreds, the appointed ones of the military force, and said to them, Take her out from inside the rows, and as for anyone coming after her, let there be an execution of death with the sword. For the priest had said, Do not let her be put to death in the house of Jehovah. So they laid their hands upon her, and she came by the way of the horse entry of the king's house, and she got put to death there. Then Jehoiada concluded the covenant between Jehovah and the king and the people, that they should prove themselves the people of Jehovah, and also between the king and the people. After that all the people of the land came to the house of Baal, and pulled down his altars, and his images they broke up thoroughly, and Mattan the priest of Baal they killed before the altars. And the priest proceeded to put overseers over the house of Jehovah. Further he took the chiefs of hundreds, and the Carian bodyguard, and the runners, and all the people of the land, that they might bring the king down from the house of Jehovah. And they came gradually by the way of the gate of the runners to the king's house, and he began to sit upon the throne of the kings. And all the people of the land continued to rejoice, and the city for its part had no disturbance. And Athaliah herself they had put to death with the sword at the king's house. 7 years old Jehoash was when he began to reign. Chapter 12. In the 7th year of Jehu, Jehoash became king, and for 40 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zibiah, from Beersheba. And Jehoash continued doing what was right in Jehovah's eyes all the days of his that Jehoiada the priest instructed him. It was only the high places that did not disappear. The people were still sacrificing and making sacrificial smoke on the high places. And Jehoash proceeded to say to the priests, all the money for the holy offerings that is brought to the house of Jehovah, the money at which each one is assessed, the money for the souls according to individual valuation, all the money that it comes up on the heart of each one to bring to the house of Jehovah, let the priests take for themselves, each one from his acquaintance, and let them for their part repair the cracks of the house wherever any crack is found. And it came about that by the 23rd year of King Jehoash, the priests had not yet repaired the cracks of the house. So King Jehoash called Jehoiada the priest and the priests, and said to them, why is it that you are not repairing the cracks of the house? Now then, do not take any more money from your acquaintances, but for the cracks of the house you should give it. At that the priests consented not to take any more money from the people, and not to repair the cracks of the house. Jehoiada the priest now took a chest, and bored a hole in its lid, and put it beside the altar on the right as a person comes into the house of Jehovah. And there the priests, the doorkeepers, put all the money that was being brought into the house of Jehovah. And it came about that as soon as they saw that there was a great deal of money in the chest, the secretary of the king and the high priest would come up, and they would bind it up and count the money that was being found at the house of Jehovah. And they gave the money that had been counted off over to the hands of doers of the work that were appointed to the house of Jehovah. In turn, they paid it out to the workers in wood, and to the builders that were working at the house of Jehovah, and to the masons and to the hewers of stone, and to buy timbers and hewn stones for repairing the cracks of the house of Jehovah, and for all that was expended upon the house to repair it. Only as respects the house of Jehovah there were not made basins of silver, extinguishers, bowls, trumpets, any sort of gold article, and article of silver from the money that was being brought to the house of Jehovah. For it was to the doers of the work that they would give it, and with it they repaired the house of Jehovah. And they would not call for an accounting with the men into whose hand they would give the money, to give to the doers of the work, because it was with faithfulness that they were working. As for the money for guilt offerings and the money for sin offerings, it was not being brought to the house of Jehovah. So it came to belong to the priests. Then it was that Hazael, the king of Syria, proceeded to go up and fight against Gath and capture it, after which Hazael set his face to go up against Jerusalem. At that Jehoash, the king of Judah, took all the holy offerings that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Ahaziah his forefathers, the kings of Judah, had sanctified, and his own holy offerings, and all the gold to be found in the treasures of the house of Jehovah, and the house of the king, and sent them to Hazael the king of Syria. So he withdrew from against Jerusalem. As for the rest of the affairs of Jehoash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? However, his servants rose up and leagued together in a conspiracy, and struck Jehoash down at the house of the mound, on the way that goes down to Silla. and Josachar the son of Shimeath, and Jehozabad the son of Shomer his servants, were the ones that struck him down, so that he died. Accordingly they buried him with his forefathers in the city of David, and Amaziah his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 13. In the 23rd year of Jehoash the son of Ahaziah the king of Judah, Jehoahaz the son of Jehu became king over Israel in Samaria for 17 years. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, and went walking in pursuit of the sin of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin. He did not turn aside from it. And Jehovah's anger became hot against Israel, so that he gave them into the hand of Hazael, the king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. In time Jehoahaz softened the face of Jehovah, so that Jehovah listened to him, for he had seen the oppression upon Israel, because the king of Syria had oppressed them. Consequently Jehovah gave Israel a Savior, so that they came out from under the hand of Syria, and the sons of Israel continued to dwell in their homes as formerly. Only they did not depart from the sin of the house of Jeroboam, with which he caused Israel to sin. In it he walked, and even the sacred pole itself stood in Samaria. For he had not left to Jehoahaz any people but 50 horsemen and 10 chariots, and 10,000 men on foot, because the king of Syria had destroyed them, that he might make them like the dust at threshing. As for the rest of the affairs of Jehoahaz and all that he did, and his mightiness, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Finally Jehoahaz lay down with his forefathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Jehoash his son began to reign in place of him. In the 37th year of Jehoash the king of Judah, Jehoash the son of Jehoahaz became king over Israel in Samaria for 16 years. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he made Israel sin. In them he walked. As for the rest of the affairs of Jehoash and all that he did, and his mightiness, and how he fought against Amaziah the king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Finally Jehoash lay down with his forefathers, and Jeroboam himself sat upon his throne. In turn Jehoash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. As regards Elisha, he had taken sick with the sickness with which he was to die. So Jehoash the king of Israel came down to him and began to weep over his face and say, my father, the war chariot of Israel and his horsemen. And Elisha proceeded to say to him, take a bow and arrows. So he took to himself a bow and arrows. And he went on to say to the king of Israel, put your hand to the bow. Accordingly he put his hand to it, after which Elisha laid his hands upon the hands of the king. Then he said, open the window to the east. So he opened it. Finally Elisha said, shoot. So he shot. He now said, Jehovah's arrow of salvation, even the arrow of salvation against Syria. And you will certainly strike down Syria at Aphek to the finishing point. And he went on to say, take the arrows. At that he took them. Then he said to the king of Israel, strike on the earth. So he struck 3 times and stopped. And the man of the true God grew indignant at him. Hence he said, it was meant to strike 5 or 6 times. In that case you would certainly be striking down Syria to the finishing point. But now it is 3 times that you will strike down Syria. After that Elisha died, and they buried him. And there were marauding bands of the Moabites that regularly came into the land at the coming in of the year. And it came about that as they were burying a man, why, here they saw the marauding band. At once they threw the man into Elisha's burial place and went off. When the man touched the bones of Elisha, he immediately came to life and stood upon his feet. As for Hazael, the king of Syria, he oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. However, Jehovah showed them favor, and had mercy upon them, and turned to them for the sake of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he did not want to bring them to ruin, and he did not cast them away from before his face until now. Finally Hazael, the king of Syria, died, and Ben-Hadad his son began to reign in place of him. And Jehoash the son of Jehoahaz proceeded to take back again from the hand of Ben-Hadad the son of Hazael the cities that he had taken from the hand of Jehoahaz his father in war. 3 times Jehoash struck him down, and he got to recover the cities of Israel. Chapter 14. In the 2nd year of Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, the king of Israel, Amaziah the son of Jehoash the king of Judah became king. 25 years old he happened to be when he began to reign, and for 29 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jehoaddan of Jerusalem. And he continued to do what was upright in Jehovah's eyes, only not like David his forefather. According to all that Jehoash his father had done, he did. It was only the high places that did not disappear. The people were still sacrificing and making sacrificial smoke on the high places. And it came about that as soon as the kingdom had become firm in his hand, he began to strike down his servants that had struck down the king his father. And the sons of the strikers he did not put to death, according to what is written in the book of Moses' law that Jehovah gave in command, saying, Fathers should not be put to death for sons, and sons themselves should not be put to death for fathers, but for his own sin should each one be put to death. He himself struck down the Edomites in the valley of Salt, 10,000 men, and got to seize Selah in the war, and its name came to be called Joktheel, down to this day. Then it was that Amaziah sent messengers to Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, the king of Israel, saying, Do come, let us look each other in the face. At that Jehoash the king of Israel sent to Amaziah the king of Judah, saying, The thorny weed itself that was in Lebanon sent to the cedar that was in Lebanon, saying, Do give your daughter to my son as a wife. However, a wild beast of the field that was in Lebanon passed by and trampled the thorny weed down. You have unmistakably struck down Edom, and your heart has lifted you up. Enjoy your honor and dwell in your own house. Why, then, should you engage in strife under unfavorable conditions and have to fall, you and Judah with you? And Amaziah did not listen. So Jehoash the king of Israel came up, and they proceeded to look each other in the face, he and Amaziah the king of Judah, at Beth-shemesh, which belongs to Judah. And Judah came to be defeated before Israel, so that they took to flight, each one to his tent. And it was Amaziah the king of Judah, the son of Jehoash, the son of Ahaziah, that Jehoash the king of Israel captured at Beth-shemesh. After which they came to Jerusalem, and he made a breach in the wall of Jerusalem at the gate of Ephraim, clear to the corner gate, 400 cubits. And he took all the gold and silver, and all the articles to be found at the house of Jehovah, and in the treasures of the house of the king, and the hostages, and then returned to Samaria. As for the rest of the affairs of Jehoash, what he did, and his mightiness, and how he fought against Amaziah the king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Finally Jehoash lay down with his forefathers, and was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel, and Jeroboam his son began to reign in place of him. And Amaziah, the son of Jehoash the king of Judah, continued to live after the death of Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, the king of Israel, for 15 years. As for the rest of the affairs of Amaziah, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? At length they leagued against him in a conspiracy at Jerusalem, and he went fleeing to Lachish. But they sent in pursuit of him to Lachish, and put him to death there. So they carried him upon horses, and he was buried in Jerusalem with his forefathers in the city of David. Then all the people of Judah took Azariah, he at the time being 16 years old, and they made him king in place of his father Amaziah. He himself built Elath, and got to restore it to Judah after the king lay down with his forefathers. In the 15th year of Amaziah, the son of Jehoash, the king of Judah, Jeroboam, the son of Jehoash, the king of Israel, became king in Samaria for 41 years. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin. He it was that restored the boundary of Israel from the entering in of Hamath clear to the sea of the Arabah, according to the word of Jehovah the God of Israel, who spoke by means of his servant Jonah, the son of Amittai, the prophet that was from Gath-hepher. For Jehovah had seen the very bitter affliction of Israel. There was neither any helpless one, nor any worthless one, nor was there a helper for Israel. And Jehovah had promised not to wipe out the name of Israel from under the heavens. Consequently, he saved them by the hand of Jeroboam, the son of Jehoash. As for the rest of the affairs of Jeroboam, and all that he did and his mightiness, how he fought and how he restored Damascus and Hamath to Judah and Israel, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Finally Jeroboam lay down with his forefathers, with the kings of Israel, and Zechariah his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 15. In the 27th year of Jeroboam, the king of Israel, Azariah the son of Amaziah the king of Judah became king. 16 years old he happened to be when he began to reign, and for 52 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jecholiah of Jerusalem. And he continued to do what was upright in Jehovah's eyes, according to all that Amaziah his father had done. It was only that the high places did not disappear. The people were still sacrificing and making sacrificial smoke on the high places. Finally Jehovah plagued the king, and he continued to be a leper until the day of his death. And he kept dwelling in his house exempt from duties, while Jotham the king's son was over the house, judging the people of the land. As for the rest of the affairs of Azariah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? At length Azariah lay down with his forefathers, and they buried him with his forefathers in the city of David. And Jotham his son began to reign in place of him. In the 38th year of Azariah the king of Judah, Zechariah the son of Jeroboam became king over Israel in Samaria for 6 months. And he went on doing what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, just as his forefathers had done. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin. Then Shallum, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him, and struck him down at Ibleam, and put him to death, and began to reign in place of him. As for the rest of the affairs of Zechariah, there they are written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel. That was Jehovah's word that he had spoken to Jehu, saying, Sons themselves to the 4th generation will sit for you upon the throne of Israel. And it came to be that way. As for Shallum, the son of Jabesh, he became king in the 39th year of Uzziah, the king of Judah, and he continued to reign for a full lunar month in Samaria. Then Menahem, the son of Gadai, came up from Tirzah and came to Samaria, and struck down Shallum the son of Jabesh in Samaria, and put him to death, and he began to reign in place of him. As for the rest of the affairs of Shallum, and his conspiracy with which he conspired, there they are, written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel. It was then that Menahem proceeded to strike down Tiphsah, and all that was in it, and its territory out from Tirzah, because it did not open up, and he went striking it down. All its pregnant women he ripped up. In the 39th year of Azariah the king of Judah, Menahem the son of Gadai became king over Israel for 10 years in Samaria. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin all his days. Pul, the king of Assyria, came into the land. Consequently, Menahem gave Pul 1,000 talents of silver, that his hands might prove to be with him to strengthen the kingdom in his own hand. So Menahem brought forth the silver at the expense of Israel, at the expense of all the valiant mighty men, to give to the king of Assyria 50 silver shekels for each man. At that the king of Assyria turned back, and he did not stay there in the land. As for the rest of the affairs of Menahem, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel? Finally Menahem lay down with his forefathers, and Pekahiah his son began to reign in place of him. In the 50th year of Azariah the king of Judah, Pekahiah the son of Menahem became king over Israel in Samaria for 2 years. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin. Then Pekah the son of Remaliah his adjutant conspired against him and struck him down in Samaria, in the dwelling tower of the king's house, with Argob and Uriah, and with him there were 50 men of the sons of Gilead. So he put him to death and began to reign in place of him. As for the rest of the affairs of Pekahiah and all that he did, there they are, written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel. In the 52nd year of Azariah the king of Judah, Pekah the son of Remaliah became king over Israel in Samaria for 20 years. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes. He did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, with which he caused Israel to sin. In the days of Pekah the king of Israel, Tiglath-Pileser the king of Assyria came in, and proceeded to take Ijon, and Abel-Beth-Maachah, and Janoah, and Kedesh, and Hazor, and Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and to carry them into exile in Assyria. Finally Hoshea, the son of Elah, formed a conspiracy against Pekah the son of Remaliah, and struck him and put him to death. And he began to reign in place of him in the 20th year of Jotham, the son of Uzziah. As for the rest of the affairs of Pekah, and all that he did, there they are written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Israel. In the 2nd year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, Jotham, the son of Uzziah, the king of Judah, became king. 25 years old he happened to be when he began to reign, and for 16 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jerusha, the daughter of Zadok. And he continued to do what was right in Jehovah's eyes. According to all that Uzziah his father had done, he did. It was only that the high places did not disappear. The people were still sacrificing and making sacrificial smoke on the high places. He it was that built the upper gate of the house of Jehovah. As for the rest of the affairs of Jotham, what he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? In those days Jehovah started to send against Judah Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah. Finally Jotham lay down with his forefathers, and was buried with his forefathers in the city of David his forefather. And Ahaz his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 16. In the 17th year of Pekah, the son of Remaliah, Ahaz the son of Jotham, the king of Judah, became king. 20 years old was Ahaz when he began to reign, and for 16 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And he did not do what was right in the eyes of Jehovah his God, like David his forefather. And he went walking in the way of the kings of Israel, and even his own son he made pass through the fire, according to the detestable things of the nations, whom Jehovah drove out because of the sons of Israel. And he kept sacrificing and making sacrificial smoke on the high places, and upon the hills, and under every luxuriant tree. It was then that Rezin, the king of Syria, and Pekah, the son of Remaliah, the king of Israel, proceeded to come up against Jerusalem in war, and laid siege against Ahaz, but they were not able to fight. At that time Rezin the king of Syria restored Elath to Edom, after which he cleared out the Jews from Elath. And the Edomites, for their part, entered Elath, and kept dwelling there down to this day. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and save me out of the palm of the king of Syria, and out of the palm of the king of Israel, who are rising up against me. Accordingly Ahaz took the silver and the gold that was to be found at the house of Jehovah, and in the treasures of the king's house, and sent the king of Assyria a bribe. At that the king of Assyria listened to him, and the king of Assyria went up to Damascus, and captured it, and led its people into exile at Kir, and Rezin he put to death. Then King Ahaz went to meet Tiglath-Pileser, the king of Assyria, at Damascus, and he got to see the altar that was in Damascus. So King Ahaz sent Urijah the priest the design of the altar and its pattern, as respects all its workmanship. And Urijah the priest proceeded to build the altar. According to all that King Ahaz had sent from Damascus was the way that Urijah the priest made it, pending the time that King Ahaz came from Damascus. When the king came from Damascus, the king got to see the altar, and the king began to go near to the altar and make offerings upon it. And he continued to make his burnt offering and his grain offering smoke, and to pour out his drink offering, and to sprinkle the blood of the communion sacrifices that were his upon the altar. And the copper altar that was before Jehovah he now brought near from in front of the house, from between his altar and the house of Jehovah, and put it at the north side of his altar. And King Ahaz went on to command him, even Urijah the priest, saying, Upon the great altar make the burnt offering of the morning smoke, also the grain offering of the evening, and the burnt offering of the king, and his grain offering, and the burnt offering of all the people of the land, and their grain offering, and their drink offerings. And all the blood of burnt offering, and all the blood of a sacrifice, you should sprinkle upon it. As for the copper altar, it will become something for me to take under consideration. And Urijah the priest went doing according to all that King Ahaz had commanded. Furthermore, King Ahaz cut the side walls of the carriages in pieces, and removed from off them the basins, and the sea he took down off the copper bowls that were underneath it, and then put it upon a stone pavement. And the covered structure for the Sabbath that they had built in the house, and the king's outer entryway, he shifted from the house of Jehovah because of the king of Assyria. As for the rest of the affairs of Ahaz, what he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? Finally Ahaz lay down with his forefathers, and was buried with his forefathers in the city of David, and Hezekiah his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 17. In the 12th year of Ahaz, the king of Judah, Hoshea the son of Elah became king in Samaria over Israel for 9 years. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, only not as the kings of Israel that happened to be prior to him. It was against him that Shalmaneser the king of Assyria came up, and Hoshea came to be his servant, and began to pay tribute to him. However, the king of Assyria got to find conspiracy in Hoshea's case, in that he had sent messengers to So, the king of Egypt, and did not bring the tribute up to the king of Assyria as in former years. Hence the king of Assyria shut him up, and kept him bound in the house of detention. And the king of Assyria proceeded to come up against all the land, and to come up to Samaria, and lay siege against it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hoshea, the king of Assyria captured Samaria, and then led Israel into exile in Assyria, and kept them dwelling in Halah, and in Habor, at the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes. And it came about because the sons of Israel had sinned against Jehovah their God, who brought them up out of the land of Egypt from under the hand of Pharaoh the king of Egypt, and they began to fear other gods. And they kept walking in the statutes of the nations whom Jehovah had driven out from before the sons of Israel, and in the statutes of the kings of Israel that they had made. And the sons of Israel went searching into the things that were not right toward Jehovah their God, and kept building themselves high places in all their cities, from the tower of the watchman clear to the fortified city. And they kept setting up for themselves sacred pillars and sacred poles upon every high hill and under every luxuriant tree. And there on all the high places they continued to make sacrificial smoke, the same as the nations whom Jehovah had taken into exile because of them, and they kept doing bad things to offend Jehovah. And they continued to serve dungy idols, concerning which Jehovah had said to them, "You must not do this thing." And Jehovah kept warning Israel and Judah by means of all his prophets and every visionary, saying, "Turn back from your bad ways, and keep my commandments, my statutes, according to all the law that I commanded your forefathers, and that I have sent to you by means of my servants the prophets." And they did not listen, but kept hardening their necks like the necks of their forefathers that had not exercised faith in Jehovah their God. And they continued rejecting his regulations and his covenant that he had concluded with their forefathers, and his reminders with which he had warned them. And they went following vain idols, and became vain themselves, even in imitation of the nations that were all around them, concerning whom Jehovah had commanded them not to do like them. And they kept leaving all the commandments of Jehovah their God, and proceeded to make for themselves molten statues, 2 calves, and to make a sacred pole. And they began to bow down to all the army of the heavens, and to serve Baal. And they continued to make their sons and their daughters pass through the fire, and to practice divination, and to look for omens. And they kept selling themselves to do what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah, to offend him. Therefore Jehovah got very incensed against Israel, so that he removed them from his sight. He did not let any remain but the tribe of Judah alone. Even Judah itself did not keep the commandments of Jehovah their God, but they went walking in the statutes of Israel that they had made. Consequently Jehovah rejected all the seed of Israel, and kept afflicting them, and giving them into the hand of pillagers, until he had cast them away from before him. For he ripped Israel off from the house of David, and they proceeded to make Jeroboam the son of Nebat king. And Jeroboam proceeded to part Israel from following Jehovah, and he caused them to sin with a great sin. And the sons of Israel went walking in all the sins of Jeroboam that he had done. They did not depart from them, until Jehovah removed Israel from his sight, just as he had spoken by means of all his servants the prophets. So Israel went off its own soil into exile in Assyria, down to this day. Subsequently the king of Assyria brought people from Babylon, and Cutha, and Ava, and Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and had them dwell in the cities of Samaria instead of the sons of Israel. And they began to take possession of Samaria, and to dwell in its cities. And it came about at the start of their dwelling there that they did not fear Jehovah. Therefore Jehovah sent lions among them, and they came to be killers among them. So they sent word to the king of Assyria, saying, "The nations that you have taken into exile, and then settled in the cities of Samaria, have not known the religion of the God of the land, so that he keeps sending lions among them. And look, they are putting them to death, inasmuch as there are none knowing the religion of the God of the land." At that the king of Assyria commanded, saying, "Have one of the priests go there, whom you led into exile from there, that he may go and dwell there, and teach them the religion of the God of the land." Accordingly one of the priests, whom they had led into exile from Samaria, came, and began dwelling in Bethel, and he came to be a teacher of them as to how they ought to fear Jehovah. However, each different nation came to be a maker of its own god, which they then deposited in the house of the high places that the Samaritans had made, each different nation in their cities where they were dwelling. And the men of Babylon for their part made Succoth-Benoth, and the men of Cuth for their part made Nergal. and the men of Hamath for their part made Ashima. As for the Avites, they made Nibhaz and Tartak. And the Sepharvites were burning their sons in the fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. And they came to be fears of Jehovah, and went making for themselves from the people in general priests of high places, and they came to be functionaries for them in the house of the high places. It was of Jehovah that they became fearers, but it was of their own gods that they proved to be worshippers, according to the religion of the nations from among whom they had led them into exile. Down to this day they are doing according to their former religions. There were none fearing Jehovah, and none doing according to his statutes and his judicial decisions, and the law and the commandment that Jehovah had commanded the sons of Jacob, whose name he made Israel, when Jehovah concluded a covenant with them, and commanded them, saying, You must not fear other gods, and you must not bow down to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. But Jehovah, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt with great power and a stretched out arm, is the one whom you should fear, and to him you should bow down, and to him you should sacrifice. And the regulations and the judicial decisions and the law and the commandment that he wrote for you, you should take care to do always, and you must not fear other gods. And the covenant that I have concluded with you, you must not forget, and you must not fear other gods. But it is Jehovah your God that you should fear, as he is the one that will deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. And they did not obey, but it was according to their former religion that they were doing. And these nations came to be fears of Jehovah, but it was their own graven images that they proved to be serving. As for both their sons and their grandsons, it was just as their forefathers had done that they themselves are doing down to this day. Chapter 18. And it came about in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, the king of Israel, that Hezekiah the son of Ahaz, the king of Judah, became king. 25 years old he happened to be when he began to reign, and for 29 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he continued to do what was right in Jehovah's eyes, according to all that David his forefather had done. He it was that removed the high places, and broke the sacred pillars to pieces, and cut down the sacred pole, and crushed to pieces the copper serpent that Moses had made. For down to those days the sons of Israel had continually been making sacrificial smoke to it, and it used to be called the copper serpent idol. In Jehovah the God of Israel he trusted, and after him there proved to be no one like him among all the kings of Judah, even those who had happened to be prior to him. And he kept sticking to Jehovah. He did not turn aside from following him, but he continued keeping his commandments that Jehovah had commanded Moses. And Jehovah proved to be with him. Wherever he would go out, he would act prudently, and he proceeded to rebel against the king of Assyria, and did not serve him. It was he that struck down the Philistines clear to Gaza and also its territories, from the tower of the watchman clear to the fortified city. And it came about in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, that is, the 7th year of Hoshea the son of Elah the king of Israel, that Shalmaneser the king of Assyria came up against Samaria, and began to lay siege to it. And they got to capture it at the end of 3 years, in the 6th year of Hezekiah, that is, the 9th year of Hoshea the king of Israel, Samaria was captured. After that, the king of Assyria took Israel into exile in Assyria, and set them down in Halah and in Habor at the river Gozan, and in the cities of the Medes, over the fact that they had not listened to the voice of Jehovah their God, but kept overstepping his covenant, even all that Moses the servant of Jehovah had commanded. They neither listened nor performed. And in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib the king of Assyria came up against all the fortified cities of Judah, and proceeded to seize them. So Hezekiah the king of Judah sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have sinned. Turn back from against me. Whatever you may impose upon me, I shall carry. Accordingly, the king of Assyria laid upon Hezekiah the king of Judah 300 silver talents and 30 gold talents. Therefore Hezekiah gave all the silver that was to be found at the house of Jehovah and in the treasures of the king's house. At that time Hezekiah cut off the doors of the temple of Jehovah and the doorposts that Hezekiah the king of Judah had overlaid, and then gave them to the king of Assyria. And the king of Assyria proceeded to send Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh from Lachish to King Hezekiah, with a heavy military force to Jerusalem, that they might go up and come to Jerusalem. So they went up and came and stood still by the conduit of the upper pool, which is at the highway of the laundryman's field. And they began to call out to the king. But there came out to them Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the secretary, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder. Accordingly Rabshakeh said to them, Please say to Hezekiah, This is what the great king, the king of Assyria, has said. What is this confidence in which you have trusted? You have said, but it is the word of lips. There are counsel and mightiness for the war. Now in whom have you put your trust, that you have rebelled against me? Now look, you have put your trust in the support of this crushed reed, Egypt, which if a man should brace himself upon it, would certainly enter into his palm and pierce it. That is the way Pharaoh the king of Egypt is to all those putting their trust in him. And in case you men should say to me, It is Jehovah our God in whom we have put our trust. Is he not the one whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has removed, while he says to Judah and Jerusalem, Before this altar you should bow down in Jerusalem? Now then make a wager, please, with my lord the king of Assyria, and let me give you 2,000 horses to see whether you are able on your part to put riders upon them. How then could you turn back the face of one governor of the smallest servants of my lord, while you for your part put your trust in Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Now is it without authorization from Jehovah that I have come up against this place to bring it to ruin? Jehovah himself said to me, Go up against this land, and you must bring it to ruin. At this Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, and Shebna and Joah said to Rabshakeh, Speak with your servants, please, in the Syrian language, for we can listen, and do not speak with us in the Jews' language in the ears of the people that are on the wall. But Rabshakeh said to them, Is it to your lord and to you that my lord has sent me to speak these words? Is it not to the men sitting upon the wall, that they may eat their own excrement and drink their own urine with you men? And Rabshakeh continued to stand and call out in a loud voice in the Jews' language. And he went on to speak and say, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. This is what the king has said. Do not let Hezekiah deceive you people, for he is not able to deliver you out of my hand. And do not let Hezekiah cause you to trust in Jehovah, saying, Without fail Jehovah will deliver us, and this city will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for this is what the king of Assyria has said. Make a capitulation to me, and come out to me, and eat each one from his own vine, and each one from his own fig tree, and drink each one the water of his own cistern, until I come and I actually take you to a land like your own land, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of oil olive trees and honey, and keep living that you may not die. And do not listen to Hezekiah, for he allures you, saying, Jehovah himself will deliver us. Have the gods of the nations at all delivered each one his own land out of the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? Who are there among all the gods of the lands that have delivered their land out of my hand, so that Jehovah should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand?" And the people kept silent, and did not answer him a word, for the commandment of the king was, saying, "You must not answer him." But Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the secretary, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their garments ripped apart, and told him the words of Rabshakeh. Chapter 19. And it came about that as soon as King Hezekiah heard, he immediately ripped his garments apart, and covered himself with sackcloth, and came into the house of Jehovah. Further, he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna the secretary, and the older men of the priests, covered with sackcloth, to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz. And they proceeded to say to him, "This is what Hezekiah has said. This day is a day of distress, and of rebuke, and of scornful insolence. For the sons have come as far as the womb's mouth, and there is no power to give birth. Perhaps Jehovah your God will hear all the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria his lord sent to taunt the living God, and he will actually call him to account for the words that Jehovah your God has heard. And you must lift up prayer in behalf of the remnant that are to be found." So the servants of King Hezekiah came in to Isaiah. Then Isaiah said to them, "This is what you should say to your Lord. This is what Jehovah has said. Do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard with which the attendants of the king of Assyria spoke abusively of me. Here I am putting a spirit in him, and he must hear a report and return to his own land, and I shall certainly cause him to fall by the sword in his own land." After that Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria fighting against Libnah, for he had heard that he had pulled away from Lachish. He heard it said respecting Tirhakah, the king of Ethiopia, "Here he has come out to fight against you." Therefore he sent messengers again to Hezekiah, saying, "This is what you men should say to Hezekiah the king of Judah. Do not let your God in whom you are trusting deceive you, saying, 'Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria.' Look, you yourself have heard what the kings of Assyria did to all the lands by devoting them to destruction. And will you yourself be delivered? Have the gods of the nations that my forefathers brought to ruin delivered them, even Gozan and Haran and Rezeph and the sons of Eden that were in Tel Assar? Where is he, the king of Hamath and the king of Arpad, and the king of the cities of Sepharvaim, Hena, and Ivah?" Then Hezekiah took the letters out of the hand of the messengers and read them, after which Hezekiah went up to the house of Jehovah and spread it out before Jehovah. And Hezekiah began to pray before Jehovah and say, "O Jehovah, the God of Israel, sitting upon the cherubs, you alone are the true God of all the kingdoms of the earth. You yourself have made the heavens and the earth. Incline your ear, O Jehovah, and hear. Open your eyes, O Jehovah, and see, and hear the words of Sennacherib that he has sent to taunt the living God. It is a fact, O Jehovah, the kings of Assyria have devastated the nations and their land, and they have consigned their gods to the fire, because they were no gods, but the workmanship of man's hands, wood and stone, so that they destroyed them. And now, O Jehovah our God, save us, please, out of his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you, O Jehovah, are God alone." And Isaiah the son of Amoz proceeded to send to Hezekiah, saying, "This is what Jehovah the God of Israel has said. The prayer that you have made to me concerning Sennacherib the king of Assyria I have heard. This is the word that Jehovah has spoken against him. The virgin daughter of Zion has despised you. She has held you in derision. Behind you the daughter of Jerusalem has wagged her head. Whom have you taunted and spoken of abusively? And against whom have you lifted up your voice, and do you raise your eyes on high? It is against the Holy One of Israel. By means of your messengers you have taunted Jehovah, and you say, with the multitude of my war chariots, I myself, I shall certainly ascend the height of mountainous regions, the remotest parts of Lebanon, and I shall cut down its lofty cedars, its choice juniper trees. And I will enter its final lodging place, the forest of its orchard. I myself shall certainly dig and drink strange waters, and I shall dry up with the soles of my feet all the Nile canals of Egypt. Have you not heard? From remote times it is what I will do. From bygone days I have even formed it. Now I will bring it in, and you will serve to make fortified cities desolate as piles of ruins, and their inhabitants will be feeble-handed. They will simply be terrified and will be ashamed. They must become as vegetation of the field and green tender grass, grass of the roofs, when there is a scorching before the east wind. And you're sitting quiet, and you're going out, and you're coming in, I well know, and you're exciting yourself against me. Because you're exciting yourself against me, and your roaring have come up into my ears, and I shall certainly put my hook in your nose, and my bridle between your lips, and I shall indeed lead you back by the way by which you have come. And this will be the sign for you. There will be an eating this year of the growth from spilled kernels, and in the second year grain that shoots up of itself. But in the third year sow seed, you people, and reap and plant vineyards and eat their fruitage. And those who escape of the house of Judah, those who are left, will certainly take root downward and produce fruitage upward. For out of Jerusalem a remnant will go forth, and those who escape from Mount Zion. The very zeal of Jehovah of armies will do this. That is why this is what Jehovah has said concerning the king of Assyria. He will not come into this city, nor will he shoot an arrow there, nor confront it with a shield, nor cast up a siege rampart against it. By the way by which he proceeded to come, he will return, and into this city he will not come, is the utterance of Jehovah. And I shall certainly defend this city to save it for my own sake, and for the sake of David my servant. And it came about on that night that the angel of Jehovah proceeded to go out and strike down 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. When people rose up early in the morning, why, there all of them were dead carcasses. Therefore Sennacherib the king of Assyria pulled away, and went and returned, and he took up dwelling in Nineveh. And it came about that as he was bowing down at the house of Nisroch his god, Adramelech and Sharezer his sons themselves struck him down with the sword, and they themselves escaped to the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 20. In those days Hezekiah got sick to the point of dying. Accordingly Isaiah the son of Amoz the prophet came in to him and said to him, This is what Jehovah has said, Give commands to your household, for you yourself will indeed die, and will not live. At that he turned his face to the wall and began to pray to Jehovah, saying, I beseech you, O Jehovah, remember, please, how I have walked before you in truthfulness and with a complete heart, and what was good in your eyes I have done. And Hezekiah began to weep profusely. And it came about that Isaiah himself had not yet gone out to the middle court, when Jehovah's word itself came to him, saying, Go back, and you must say to Hezekiah the leader of my people, This is what Jehovah the God of David your forefather has said. I have heard your prayer. I have seen your tears. Here I am healing you. On the third day you will go up to the house of Jehovah, and I shall certainly add 15 years to your days. And out of the palm of the king of Assyria I shall deliver you and this city, and I will defend this city for my own sake, and for the sake of David my servant. And Isaiah went on to say, You men, take a cake of pressed dried figs. So they took and put it upon the boil, after which he gradually revived. Meantime, Hezekiah said to Isaiah, "What is the sign that Jehovah will heal me, and I shall certainly go up on the third day to the house of Jehovah?" To this Isaiah said, "This is the sign for you from Jehovah, that Jehovah will perform the word that he has spoken. Shall the shadow actually go forward 10 steps of the stairs, or should it go back 10 steps?" Then Hezekiah said, "It is an easy thing for the shadow to extend itself 10 steps, but not that the shadow should go backward 10 steps." At that Isaiah the prophet began to call out to Jehovah, and he made the shadow that had gone down gradually go back on the steps, that is, on the steps of the stairs of Ahaz, 10 steps backward. At that time, Berodach-Baladan, the son of Baladan the king of Babylon, sent letters and a gift to Hezekiah, for he had heard that Hezekiah had been sick. And Hezekiah proceeded to listen to them, and show them all his treasure house, the silver and the gold and the balsam oil and the good oil and his armory, and all that was to be found in his treasures. There proved to be nothing that Hezekiah did not show them in his own house and in all his dominion. After that Isaiah the prophet came in to King Hezekiah and said to him, "What did these men say, and from where did they proceed to come to you?" So Hezekiah said, "From a distant land they came, from Babylon." And he went on to say, "What did they see in your house?" To this Hezekiah said, "Everything that is in my house they saw. There proved to be nothing that I did not show them in my treasures." Isaiah now said to Hezekiah, "Hear the word of Jehovah. Look, days are coming, and all that is in your own house, and that your forefathers have stored up down to this day, will actually be carried to Babylon. Nothing will be left, Jehovah has said. And some of your own sons that will come forth from you, to whom you will become father, will themselves be taken and actually become court officials in the palace of the king of Babylon." At that Hezekiah said to Isaiah, "The word of Jehovah that you have spoken is good." And he went on to say, "Is it not so, if peace and truth themselves will continue in my own days?" As for the rest of the affairs of Hezekiah, and all his mightiness, and how he made the pool and the conduit, and then brought the water into the city, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? Finally Hezekiah lay down with his forefathers, and Manasseh his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 21. 12 years old was Manasseh when he began to reign, and for 55 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hephzibah. And he proceeded to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, according to the detestable things of the nations that Jehovah had driven out from before the sons of Israel. So he built again the high places that Hezekiah his father had destroyed, and set up altars to Baal, and made a sacred pole, just as Ahab the king of Israel had done. And he began to bow down to all the army of the heavens, and to serve them. And he built altars in the house of Jehovah, respecting which Jehovah had said, "In Jerusalem I shall put my name." And he went on to build altars to all the army of the heavens in 2 courtyards of the house of Jehovah. And he made his own son pass through the fire, and he practiced magic, and looked for omens, and made spirit mediums, and professional foretellers of events. He did on a large scale what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, to offend him. Further, he put the carved image of the sacred pole that he had made in the house of which Jehovah had said to David and to Solomon his son, "In this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I shall put my name to time indefinite. And I shall not again make the foot of Israel wander from the ground that I gave to their forefathers, provided only they are careful to do according to all that I have commanded them, even concerning all the law that my servant Moses commanded them." And they did not listen, but Manasseh kept seducing them to do what was bad more than the nations whom Jehovah had annihilated from before the sons of Israel. And Jehovah kept speaking by means of his servants the prophets, saying, For the reason that Manasseh the king of Judah has done these detestable things, he has acted more wickedly than all that the Amorites did that were prior to him, and he proceeded to make even Judah sin with his dungy idols. That is why this is what Jehovah the God of Israel has said. Here I am bringing a calamity upon Jerusalem and Judah, of which if anyone hears, both his ears will tingle. And I shall certainly stretch upon Jerusalem the measuring line applied to Samaria, and also the leveling instrument applied to the house of Ahab. And I shall simply wipe Jerusalem clean, just as one wipes the handleless bowl clean, wiping it clean and turning it upside down. And I shall indeed forsake the remnant of my inheritance, and give them into the hand of their enemies, and they will simply become plunder and pillage to all their enemies, for the reason that they did what was bad in my eyes, and were continually offending me from the day that their forefathers came out from Egypt, down to this day. And there was also innocent blood that Manasseh shed in very great quantity, until he had filled Jerusalem from end to end, besides his sin with which he caused Judah to sin by doing what was bad in the eyes of Jehovah. As for the rest of the affairs of Manasseh, and all that he did, and his sin with which he sinned, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? Finally Manasseh lay down with his forefathers, and was buried in the garden of his house, in the garden of Uzzah, and Amon his son began to reign in place of him. 22 years old was Amon when he began to reign, and for 2 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Meshullemeth, the daughter of Haraz, from Jotbah. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, just as Manasseh his father had done. And he kept walking in all the way that his father had walked. And he continued serving the dungy idols that his father had served, and bowing down to them. Thus he left Jehovah the God of his forefathers, and he did not walk in the way of Jehovah. Eventually servants of Amon conspired against him, and put the king to death in his own house. But the people of the land struck down all the conspirators against King Amon. Then the people of the land made Josiah his son king in place of him. As for the rest of the affairs of Amon, what he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? So they buried him in his grave in the garden of Uzzah, and Josiah his son began to reign in place of him. Chapter 22. 8 years old was Josiah when he began to reign, and for 31 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adiah from Bozkath. And he proceeded to do what was right in Jehovah's eyes, and to walk in all the way of David his forefather, and he did not turn aside to the right or to the left. And it came about in the 18th year of King Josiah, that the king sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam the secretary, to the house of Jehovah, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, and let him complete the money that is being brought into the house of Jehovah, that the doorkeepers have gathered from the people, and let them put it into the hand of those doing the work, the appointed ones in the house of Jehovah, that they may give it to those doing the work who are in the house of Jehovah, to repair the cracks of the house, to the craftsmen and the builders and the masons, and to buy timbers and hewn stones to repair the house. Only no accounting should be taken of the money with them into whose hand it is being put, for it is in faithfulness that they are working. Later Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the secretary, The very book of the law I have found in the house of Jehovah. So Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, and he began to read it. Then Shaphan the secretary came in to the king, and replied to the king, and said, Your servants have poured out the money that was to be found in the house, and they keep putting it into the hand of the doers of the work, the ones appointed in the house of Jehovah. And Shaphan the secretary went on to tell the king, saying, There is a book that Hilkiah the priest has given me. And Shaphan began to read it before the king. And it came about that as soon as the king heard the words of the book of the law, he immediately ripped his garments apart. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam the son of Shaphan, and Achbor the son of Micaiah, and Shaphan the secretary, and Asaiah the king's servant, saying, Go inquire of Jehovah in my own behalf, and in behalf of the people, and in behalf of all Judah concerning the words of this book that has been found. For great is Jehovah's rage that has been set afire against us, over the fact that our forefathers did not listen to the words of this book by doing according to all that is written concerning us. Accordingly Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam, and Achbor, and Shaphan, and Asaiah went to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikvah, the son of Harhas, the caretaker of the garments, as she was dwelling in Jerusalem in the 2nd quarter, and they proceeded to speak to her. In turn she said to them, This is what Jehovah the God of Israel has said. Say to the man that has sent you men to me, This is what Jehovah has said. Here I am bringing calamity upon this place and upon its inhabitants, even all the words of the book that the king of Judah has read, due to the fact that they have left me, and have gone making sacrificial smoke to other gods in order to offend me with all the work of their hands. And my rage has been set afire against this place, and will not be extinguished. And as to the king of Judah who is sending you to inquire of Jehovah, this is what you should say to him. This is what Jehovah the God of Israel has said. As regards the words that you have heard, for the reason that your heart was soft, so that you humbled yourself because of Jehovah, at your hearing what I have spoken against this place and its inhabitants, for it to become an object of astonishment and a malediction, and then you ripped your garments apart and began weeping before me. I, even I, have heard, is the utterance of Jehovah. That is why here I am gathering you to your forefathers, and you will certainly be gathered to your own graveyard in peace, and your eyes will not look upon all the calamity that I am bringing upon this place. And they proceeded to bring the king the reply. Chapter 23. Then the king sent, and they gathered together to him all the older men of Judah and Jerusalem. After that the king went up to the house of Jehovah, and also all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and also the priests and the prophets and all the people from small to great. And he began to read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant that had been found in the house of Jehovah. And the king kept standing by the pillar, and now concluded the covenant before Jehovah, to walk after Jehovah, and to keep his commandments and his testimonies and his statutes with all the heart and with all the soul, by carrying out the words of this covenant that were written in this book. Accordingly all the people took their stand in the covenant. And the king went on to command Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the 2nd rank, and the doorkeepers, to bring out from the temple of Jehovah all the utensils made for Baal, and for the sacred pole, and for all the army of the heavens. Then he burned them outside Jerusalem, on the terraces of Kidron, and he brought the dust of them to Bethel. And he put out of business the foreign god priests, whom the kings of Judah had put in, that they might make sacrificial smoke on the high places in the cities of Judah and the surroundings of Jerusalem, and also those making sacrificial smoke to Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the constellations of the zodiac, and to all the army of the heavens. Furthermore, he brought out the sacred pole from the house of Jehovah to the outskirts of Jerusalem, to the torrent valley of Kidron, and burned it in the torrent valley of Kidron, and ground it to dust, and cast its dust upon the burial place of the sons of the people. Further, he pulled down the houses of the male temple prostitutes that were in the house of Jehovah, where the women were weaving tent shrines for the sacred pole. Then he brought all the priests from the cities of Judah, that he might make unfit for worship the high places where the priests had made sacrificial smoke, from Geba as far as Beersheba, and he pulled down the high places of the gates that were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the chief of the city, which was at the left as a person came into the gate of the city. Only the priests of the high places would not come up to the altar of Jehovah in Jerusalem, but they ate unfermented cakes in among their brothers. And he made unfit for worship Topheth, which is in the valley of the sons of Hinnom, that no one might make his son or his daughter pass through the fire to Molech. Further, he caused the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun to cease from entering the house of Jehovah by the dining room of Nathan-Melech, the court official, which was in the porticos, and the chariots of the sun he burned in the fire. And the altars that were upon the roof of the roof chamber of Ahaz that the kings of Judah had made, and the altars that Manasseh had made in 2 courtyards of the house of Jehovah, the king pulled down, after which he crushed them there, and he cast their dust into the torrent valley of Kidron. And the high places that were in front of Jerusalem, that were to the right of the Mount of Ruination, that Solomon the king of Israel had built to Ashtoreth, the disgusting thing of the Sidonians, and to Chemosh, the disgusting thing of Moab, and to Milcom, the detestable thing of the sons of Ammon, the king made unfit for worship. And he broke the sacred pillars to pieces, and went on to cut down the sacred poles, and to fill their places with human bones. And also the altar that was in Bethel, the high place that Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin, had made, even that altar and the high place he pulled down. Then he burned the high place, he ground it to dust, and burned the sacred pole. When Josiah turned, he got to see the burial places that were there in the mountain. So he sent and took the bones from the burial places, and burned them upon the altar, that he might make it unfit for worship, according to Jehovah's word that the man of the true God had proclaimed, who proclaimed these things. Then he said, "What is the gravestone over there that I am seeing?" At this the men of the city said to him, "It is the burial place of the man of the true God that came from Judah, and proceeded to proclaim these things that you have done against the altar of Bethel." So he said, "Let him rest. Do not let anyone disturb his bones." Consequently they let his bones alone, along with the bones of the prophet that had come from Samaria. And also all the houses of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, that the kings of Israel had built to cause offense, Josiah removed, and he went on to do to them according to all the doings that he had done at Bethel. Accordingly he sacrificed all the priests of the high places that were there upon the altars, and burned human bones upon them. After that he returned to Jerusalem. The king now commanded all the people, saying, "Hold a Passover to Jehovah your God, according to what is written in this book of the covenant." For no Passover like this had been held from the days of the judges that had judged Israel, nor all the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was held to Jehovah in Jerusalem. And also the spirit mediums, and the professional foretellers of events, and the teraphim, and the dungy idols, and all the disgusting things that had appeared in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem, Josiah cleared out, in order that he might actually carry out the words of the law that were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest had found at the house of Jehovah. And like him there did not prove to be a king prior to him who returned to Jehovah with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his vital force, according to all the law of Moses. Neither after him has there risen up one like him. Nevertheless, Jehovah did not turn back from the great burning of his anger, with which his anger burned against Judah over all the offensive things with which Manasseh had made them offend. But Jehovah said, "Judah too I shall remove from my sight, just as I have removed Israel. And I shall certainly reject this city that I have chosen, even Jerusalem, and the house of which I have said, my name will continue there." As for the rest of the affairs of Josiah, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? In his days Pharaoh Necho, the king of Egypt, came up to the king of Assyria by the river Euphrates, and King Josiah proceeded to go to meet him. But he put him to death at Megiddo as soon as he saw him. So his servants conveyed him dead in a chariot from Megiddo, and brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his grave. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz, the son of Josiah, and anointed him, and made him king in place of his father. 23 years old was Jehoahaz when he began to reign, and for 3 months he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah from Libnah. And he began to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, according to all that forefathers of his had done. And Pharaoh Necho got to put him in bonds at Riblah in the land of Hamath, to keep him from reigning in Jerusalem, and then imposed a fine upon the land of 100 silver talents and a gold talent. Furthermore, Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in place of Josiah his father, and changed his name to Jehoiakim, and Jehoahaz he took and then brought to Egypt, where he eventually died. And the silver and the gold Jehoiakim gave to Pharaoh. Only he taxed the land to give the silver at the order of Pharaoh. According to each one's individual tax rate, he exacted the silver and the gold from the people of the land, to give it to Pharaoh Necho. 25 years old was Jehoiakim when he began to reign, and for 11 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Zebidah, the daughter of Pedaiah from Rumah. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, according to all that forefathers of his had done. Chapter 24. In his days Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon came up, and so Jehoiakim became his servant for 3 years. However, he turned back and rebelled against him. And Jehovah began to send against him marauder bands of Chaldeans, and marauder bands of Syrians, and marauder bands of Moabites, and marauder bands of the sons of Ammon, and he kept sending them against Judah to destroy it, according to Jehovah's word that he had spoken by means of his servants the prophets. It was only by the order of Jehovah that it took place against Judah, to remove it from his sight for the sins of Manasseh, according to all that he had done, and also for the innocent blood that he had shed, so that he filled Jerusalem with innocent blood, and Jehovah did not consent to grant forgiveness. As for the rest of the affairs of Jehoiakim and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the affairs of the days of the kings of Judah? Finally, Jehoiakim lay down with his forefathers, and Jehoiakim his son began to reign in place of him. And never again did the king of Egypt come out from his land, for the king of Babylon had taken all that happened to belong to the king of Egypt, from the torrent valley of Egypt up to the river Euphrates. 18 years old was Jehoiakim when he began to reign, and for 3 months he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, according to all that his father had done. During that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon came up to Jerusalem, so that the city came under siege. And Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon proceeded to come against the city, while his servants were laying siege against it. At length Jehoiakim the king of Judah went out to the king of Babylon, he with his mother and his servants and his princes and his court officials. And the king of Babylon got to take him in the 8th year of his being king. Then he brought out from there all the treasures of the house of Jehovah, and the treasures of the king's house, and went on to cut to pieces all the gold utensils that Solomon the king of Israel had made in the temple of Jehovah, just as Jehovah had spoken. And he took into exile all Jerusalem, and all the princes, and all the valiant mighty men. 10,000 he was taking into exile, and also every craftsman and builder of bulwarks. No one had been left behind except the lowly class of the people of the land. Thus he took Jehoiakim into exile to Babylon, and the king's mother and the king's wives and his court officials, and the foremost men of the land he led away as exiled people from Jerusalem to Babylon. As for all the valiant men, 7,000, and the craftsmen and the builders of bulwarks, 1,000, all the mighty men carrying on war, the king of Babylon proceeded to bring them as exiled people to Babylon. Further, the king of Babylon made Mattaniah his uncle king in place of him. Then he changed his name to Zedekiah. 21 years old was Zedekiah when he began to reign, and for 11 years he reigned in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah from Libnah. And he continued to do what was bad in Jehovah's eyes, according to all that Jehoiakim had done. For on account of the anger of Jehovah it took place in Jerusalem and in Judah, until he had cast them out of his sight. And Zedekiah began to rebel against the king of Babylon. Chapter 25. And it came about in the 9th year of his being king, in the 10th month on the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon came, yes, he and all his military force, against Jerusalem, and began camping against it, and building against it a siege wall all around. And the city came to be under siege until the 11th year of King Zedekiah. On the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine was severe in the city, and there proved to be no bread for the people of the land. And the city got to be breached, and all the men of war fled by night by the way of the gate between the double wall that is by the king's garden, while the Chaldeans were all around against the city. And the king began to go in the direction of the Arabah. And a military force of Chaldeans went chasing after the king, and they got to overtake him in the desert plains of Jericho, and all his own military force was scattered from his side. Then they seized the king and brought him up to the king of Babylon at Riblah, that they might pronounce a judicial decision upon him. And Zedekiah's sons they slaughtered before his eyes, and Zedekiah's eyes he blinded, after which he bound him with copper fetters and brought him to Babylon. And in the 5th month on the 7th day of the month, that is to say, the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, Nebuzaradan, the chief of the bodyguard, the servant of the king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem. And he proceeded to burn the house of Jehovah, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and the house of every great man he burned with fire. And the walls of Jerusalem all around, the entire military force of Chaldeans that were with the chief of the bodyguard pulled down. And the rest of the people that were left behind in the city, and the deserters that had gone over to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the crowd, Nebuzaradan, the chief of the bodyguard, took into exile. And some of the lowly people of the land the chief of the bodyguard let remain as vine-dressers and compulsory laborers. And the pillars of copper that were in the house of Jehovah, and the carriages, and the copper sea that were in the house of Jehovah, the Chaldeans broke in pieces, and went carrying the copper of them to Babylon. And the cans, and the shovels, and the extinguishers, and the cups, and all the utensils of copper with which they used to minister they took. And the chief of the bodyguard took the fire holders, and the bowls that were of genuine gold, and those that were of genuine silver. As for the 2 pillars, the one sea, and the carriages that Solomon had made for the house of Jehovah, there happened to be no way to tell the weight of the copper of all these utensils. 18 cubits was the height of each pillar, and the capital upon it was of copper, and the height of the capital was 3 cubits, and the network and the pomegranates all around upon the capital, the whole of it was copper, and the 2nd pillar had the same as these upon the network. Furthermore, the chief of the bodyguard took Seraiah the chief priest, and Zephaniah the 2nd priest, and 3 doorkeepers. And from the city he took 1 court official that had a command over the men of war, and 5 men from those having access to the king that were found in the city. And the secretary of the chief of the army, the one mustering the people of the land, and 60 men of the people of the land that were to be found in the city. And Nebuzaradan, the chief of the bodyguard, then took them and conducted them to the king of Babylon at Riblah. And the king of Babylon proceeded to strike them down and put them to death at Riblah in the land of Hamath. Thus Judah went into exile from off its soil. As for the people left behind in the land of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon had left behind, he now appointed over them Gedaliah the son of Ahikam, the son of Shaphan. When all the chiefs of the military forces, they and their men, heard that the king of Babylon had appointed Gedaliah, they immediately came to Gedaliah at Mizpah, that is, Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, and Johanan the son of Kareah, and Seraiah the son of Tanhumeth the Netophathite, and Jaazaniah the son of the Maacathite, they and their men. Then Gedaliah swore to them and their men, and said to them, Do not be afraid of being servants to the Chaldeans. Dwell in the land, and serve the king of Babylon, and it will go well with you. And it came about in the 7th month that Ishmael the son of Nethaniah the son of Elishama of the royal offspring came, and also 10 men with him. And they got to strike down Gedaliah, so that he died, and also the Jews and the Chaldeans that happened to be with him in Mizpah. After that all the people, from small to great, and the chiefs of the military forces rose up and came into Egypt, for they had become afraid because of the Chaldeans. And it came about in the 37th year of the exile of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, in the 12th month, on the 27th day of the month, that Evil-Merodach, the king of Babylon, in the year of his becoming king, raised up the head of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, out of the house of detention. And he began to speak good things with him, and then put his throne higher than the thrones of the kings that were with him in Babylon. And he took off his prison garments, and he ate bread constantly before him all the days of his life. As for his allowance, an allowance was constantly given him from the king, daily as due, all the days of his life.